station.
Please no. Please no. Please.
He says the men ripped his jeans.
Stop now!
Security camera captures her desperate struggle before the man drags her.
I didn't see now.
Thank you very much for taking time to watch this Live Safe Academy video. My goal here today is to do everything I can to help you be safe, and I'm honored that you're willing to spend some of your time with me, and I hope that I can be of service. I also want to introduce our featured guest here today, Lou Chiodo of Gunfighters Limited. Lou, thank you much for being a part of this video series. I'm looking forward to not only doing this video with you, but all the future videos that we're going to do in this topic, where we're going to give people an after-action report of different crimes that we can show you as an opportunity to teach important principles that can help keep you safe. And I want to start by saying that we're never second-guessing these people. We're not playing armchair quarterbacks here. The victim never deserves a crime, and we're never here to critique people that have had to go through these experiences. We're only here to use those experiences as an opportunity to teach people principles that they can take away to help keep them more safe in the future. And now that we've kind of laid the groundwork for this, let me introduce our feature presenter, Lou Chiodo of Gunfighters Limited. Sir, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you're having a great day today.
Well, good morning, Ian. I sure am, and glad to be here to discuss some important issues.
But let's start from the very beginning, the issue of prevention, and let's talk about some ways that a person can avoid being in that type of a conflict in the first place.
Well, sure. Well, as we all know, you can't really defend against something that you don't know exists. So our first place that we would say that you'd want to look at is what type of early warning system can you have in place within your dwelling to allow you the ability to know that something is either in the process of happening or just about to happen. As an example, if you have windows open on the bottom floor, you don't have an alarm system running, if you're not physically in visual contact with that particular opening, such as an open window, unlocked door, that sort of thing, there'd be no way of you being able to visualize someone that's about to do you harm. So you'd have to, in this whole realm of prevention, have to analyze, what can I do to either delay the attack so that it would allow me to be able to have more reaction time to it, or possibly just prevent it from happening in the first place.
So an important concept here is that you can't have response without recognition. We have to be aware that something bad is happening. And in addition to that, the more time we have to respond, the better chance we have of an effective response. So we always want to try to position ourselves in our environment so we're less likely to get caught off guard and we have more time to react. And when we're at home, one of the ways that we can do that is keep our doors locked, keep our windows locked, have an alarm system, and or have a dog that's going to give us that early warning sign to let us know that something is wrong in the first place. That gives us the time that we have to react, which I think leads us to our next point, Lou, which is that we don't want to wait until we're in the problem to solve the problem. We want to have a way to react so that when we're in the moment, we already have that plan of action. So as an example, when we were in school, we were kids, adults were watching over us. They didn't wait till the school was on fire before they scratched their head and they said, now what the heck do we do? They had a way to get all the kids out of that building if there was a fire, and then we practiced that. So God forbid there was a fire, everybody would be more prepared to respond. And I think it's safe to say that in the home we want to do the same thing. God forbid something bad happens, like somebody's breaking in. If we recognize that in time to respond, well, we already want to have a response in place.
Well, these are both key points that you make. One, in the preparation for a possible incident, we'd have to analyze, as we've talked about, having a prior warning system in place. And then we also, in this planning, have to determine what type of weapon systems we want access to, where are we going to place them, how easily can we get to them from locations in the house. This may mean you may have to have a couple of options. As an example, if you have a house that has a downstairs and upstairs, well, having, let's say, your firearm upstairs may not do you any good if you're downstairs when the attack happens. So you may have to analyze your particular scenario to determine what equipment you need, where it needs to be placed, how accessible it is, and of course, what level of equipment do you want? Is it something that's going to be a firearm? Are you talking about an edge weapon? These are determinations you make well prior to the incident. And as you've alluded to, just as we did when we did fire drills in school, I'm old enough to remember us having to do nuclear attack drills by, I don't know how good it would have been for us, but to crawl underneath the table during a nuclear attack, there may be a point of diminishing returns. But the key is it was the preparation for it. And if we go into a scenario within our house that we've prepared for, obviously the results could be entirely different than if we wait to the incident happening to determine, okay, where is my gun? And if I have my firearm available, where's the nearest access I have to a phone to it, so that I may be able to dial out a 911 call. These are all things that we can iron out beforehand to make this whole process easier when an actual event happens. Because we both know that these incidents are extremely high stress for anybody that's involved in it. Even well-trained people are going to get affected by spontaneous incidents. Now, if you're an individual that, let's say, has had a very sheltered life of violence, and this might be the first time that you've ever had anybody aggressively try to attack you or be in your space with the intent to hurt you, this can be overwhelming for people, and the only possible way that we can really overcome that is through the prior training and prior preparation that we put into this before that incident happens.
You know, oftentimes the outcome of an emergency is determined by the decisions that we make before the emergency, like wearing seatbelts. You know, you don't wait to put on a seatbelt until the accident is already in progress, because most folks understand that they would never have time to get the seatbelt on once the accident already starts. They put that seatbelt on ahead of time so that it's already in place if they run into a problem. Now, the issue with weapons, a lot of times people hear that and they only think gun. And although guns can be a very effective tool, there are other options that people can avail themselves of as well. Something as simple as a writing pen. You know, you can leave writing pens strategically all around the house that most people aren't going to associate with a weapon, but if you have the proper training to understand how to use it effectively, not just desperately stab at somebody because you may not get very much effect from that, but if you understand how to injure somebody with a pen, the sheer amount of injury that you can cause in a short period of time is simply devastating. And now you can be in that better position to injure somebody than maybe they are of injuring you, and that can give you that life and death advantage. So pens, you can have as many of those as you want. You can strategically place them. Another thing that I've often done is I take these very inexpensive, old-fashioned nightsticks, you know, the kind that cops used to have, the hardwood, and security guards maybe sometimes still carry as well. They're very inexpensive, but as a implement to cause injury, they're really hard to beat. And you can easily hang those up where you have your curtains, so that I would take a nail, I put it into the wall, then I would do this where the curtain closes. So what happens is, I would mean to say at the end of the curtains, so that this club was always covered. Whether the curtains were open or closed, because it was at the end of the windows, the club was always covered. And now you could very quickly get to it, but nobody else knows it's there to use it against you. The problem with leaving weapons out is whoever sees it first gets to use it first. But if you have pens around, because people don't associate that with a weapon, they're not likely to grab it and use it against you, but you can use it against them. If you have that type of a nightstick that's hidden behind a curtain on a window, they don't know it's there, they're not going to use it against you, but it increases the probability that you can get to it if you need it. And then the other issue, there's a lot of times people carry revolvers in their pockets. That's a very comfortable way to carry a gun, and if you're at home wearing clothes and you're wearing clothes with pockets, it's really nothing to drop a revolver in your pocket. And there is an argument, and I know many police officers who do this, and private citizens too, where if they're wearing whatever their normal pants are, their shorts, whatever, their standard method of operation is to have that revolver in their pocket, which really dramatically increases the probability that they'll have a gun on their body if they need it, even when they're at home, without inconveniencing them in any way or putting them at any discomfort. So the disadvantage of a weapon is it's not always going to be there no matter who you are. You're never 100% of the time going to have a weapon there. But the advantage of a weapon is if you know how to use it and you can quickly deploy it, you can increase your probability of stopping a threat.
Well, these are all great points. They're all points that in your preparation for a potential incident, it's very easily done. And then I think that's probably one of the best points of it, is that what you've just alluded to is simplicity. It's something that doesn't require a ton of preparation for, just a little forethought, understand how each one of these particular weapons are going to work. It may require you to go take some instruction in their use, but this is all time that is well spent, because after all, it is your safety that's involved in it. And many times, a lot of these weapons that you're talking about also buy you time to do other things that will be done in the sequence of use a weapon, delay their attack, inflict damage on the person trying to hurt you. That allows you more options there. You may have an option of just completely vacating the area. You can leave your house if you've got the opportunity to do it. If that's not possible, it may allow you to be able to access a more lethal weapon, meaning while you've inflicted injury, in that brief time you may have of them trying to recover from the injury, you can maneuver to the place in your house where you do keep your firearm. So it opens up doors for us to be able to say that even though it may not be the best solution, we would all probably agree if you had a home invader in your house and they were looking to hurt you and your family, probably nothing better than a round that's centered in the center of their face. But the problem is that may not be the initial option. However, if you use a baton, as you've indicated, or you use that pen to inflict trauma, even though the trauma might not completely stop the person, if it gives you that extra 3, 5, 10 seconds to maneuver, that's what we could gain probably as a real positive thing out of using one of those weapons. And who knows, you may just deter the entire attack, but you cannot tell that until you really get there. So I think these are all great suggestions that you have. And again, it all comes back to the concept of preparation. If you don't do these things, they're not going to be available. And I think that's one of the key points we're trying to make.
So we're talking in terms here of prevention, of preparation, an important part of which is having a plan in place before you need it, and giving yourself the early warning signs that you have time to respond and implement that plan. And of course, when we talk about the issue of weapons, that's not just planned weapons like a pen or a firearm or a impact weapon, but even weapons of opportunity, things that you can just grab and hit them with because they're close by and you can get them to them in time, or things that, you know, if the level of force justifies. And of course, in a home invasion here in Michigan, I can't speak for other states, but here in Michigan, if it is a legitimate, genuine home invasion, that's categorized as a lethal threat. So you could, if necessary, lawfully smash somebody's head into something hard. That's a weapon of opportunity too, because you're using that close by hard object like a wall, the floor, a piece of furniture as a way to disrupt their consciousness by hitting their head into it. And I'll give you a real brief example of this pen, Lou. I had a student who was at imminent risk of her ex-husband trying to get to her and hurt her. So she learned unarmed self-defense. She also learned how to use a firearm, and she learned how to use a pen. Well, we're not going to put the firearm on her nightstand because obviously if she's asleep, if he gets access to that room, he can take that weapon away from her and use it against her. So she concealed the gun, but what she kept on her nightstand was a pen. So if he was on top of her, she could hit him, she could get to that pen and stab him, both of which could buy her opportunity to quickly get to that gun that was concealed close by and let her deploy that firearm. And that's a very good sequence of progressions that could be in place so that you can quickly go to whatever option you need and possibly create the opportunity to get to another option if that other option was more advantageous and it was available to you. So I think that's a kind of a good example of the point that you're making. And when we are talking about this issue of prevention, I always want to be very careful to say that the victim never deserves the crime. But the best way not to be there on the back end is not to be there on the front end. And a lot of crimes can be easy to avoid if you recognize the warning signs. Now, I'm not talking about a home invasion here. Although there are ways to make your home a less likely target, there's nothing that we can do to become crime-proof. There's always that risk that a crime can happen. But a lot of times, and I teach in a college system where I deal with a lot of women who are in abusive relationships, and some of those abusive relationships end up in situations where people are horribly beat, they're shot, they're stabbed. These are all students that have come to me after going through these types of tragedies. And the best way not to be there on the back end is not to be there on the front end. I know there's a lot of psychological dynamics that go into this issue, so I'm not trying to oversimplify here. But not being in that abusive relationship is the best way not to be there when these violent confrontations happen, to stay out of the abusive relationship in the first place, or to get out of the abusive relationship if you end up in one.
Well, I think that's 100% right. As you stated, there are many reasons why people are in these relationships that kind of linger in violence. I dealt with this in a law enforcement capacity, so it's kind of a very difficult thing psychologically to try to analyze. That's for the professionals to do who deal with that stuff continually. I think what you're alluding to is that for many people, it really, they become victims of this, not because it's maybe some psychological issues that they're dealing with, or that they're very deep into this relationship and can't break the ties, that's where a lot of professional help is really needed. But a lot of times these things escalate from something minor to continually grow into more abuse and more punishment, more violence. Now, we would recommend to, particularly for the females, no guy has a right to put their hands on you unless that's what you want done to you. So if you're getting hit by someone that you are trusting to be a partner or more than just a casual relationship with them, that's probably the time before it gets worse to try to pull out and leave. I think that's what you're alluding to. And that's probably the safest way to avoid it in the first place. And a lot of that just has to do in how an individual internalizes how much they're willing to accept before they leave. And beyond that, I think it's safe to say that there's probably a lot of other psychological things going on that there's a certain level of help that would be needed to help that person through.
I agree 100%, Lou. And I think another important thing to talk about here before we close out this podcast or this video is to talk about how to respond once the emergency is already in progress, how to deal with the actual physical attack. And I know you and I are 100% believers in this, and this is a real big pet peeve of mine. A lot of time instructors teach self-defense as a guarantee, and there are no guarantees. I don't care how much training you have. I don't care what you do for a living. I don't care how much experience you have or what you care for protection. Nobody is immune to injury or death. Everybody breaks, bleeds, and dies, and everybody is capable of losing. So there are important things that we can do to increase our chance of success, but there's nothing that we can do to guarantee our chance of success. If you are in a violent situation, there are circumstances beyond your control, or you would not be in that violent situation. So without pretending that there are things that we can do to guarantee our chance of success, let's talk about things that we can do to increase our chance of success, to create the possibility that we can stop that person from hurting us. And I think the two obvious things are aggression and a weapon. If you are at any physical disadvantage, which will almost always be the case because the assailant is looking for somebody that they have an advantage over, both physically and psychologically. If you are at any disadvantage, a weapon can help to overcome that disadvantage. And I, again, don't just mean a firearm, an impact weapon, a sharp weapon, a taser, pepper spray. No weapon is 100% effective. No weapon is 100% ineffective. But learning how to use the tools that will give us the best chance of stopping them, creating that opportunity that we can get to safety and report that crime, can be a life-saving difference. But the other bottom line here is whether you're armed or not, aggression is always going to be, mindset is always going to be the most important factor that determines the outcome of any aggressive action. We all know of big guys that got beat by little folks because that smaller person was more aggressive than they were. So aggression is really a key component to victory, and that comes from placing enough value on innocent life that you think innocent life is worth fighting for. And if you're that victim, then you're that innocent life, and you've got to have the moral conviction to fight for your life, just like you would fight for any other innocent person, just like a mother would fight for a child.
Well, I agree, and I would add to that part of the way that we can develop an individual to project that aggression is the manner in which we train them. And then this, again, is something that I've seen in a lot of places, that they put a false sense of security in, quote, techniques or things that they're teaching that really don't work against the violent, aggressive people that are attacking you. So to kind of link in what you're saying here is that there's not only the necessity for someone to become extremely aggressive, and there's no other way of saying it, is you got to become violent, and probably more violent than the person that you're fighting. That's how we win fights. You just got to hit more, and you got to hit harder, and you got to hit with that resolve to win. But the training that the person undergoes is going to have a real impact on how well their aggression comes through, and also a way of developing someone so that that aggression not only comes out as part of the way that they're going to respond, but integrate that aggression with methods that are going to be more effective than some of the other things. I've seen this as a martial artist now for over 50 years. You look at a lot of the things that are taught to people, and within 2 seconds of looking at it, you say, well, that's never going to work. Now, probably 70% of the time they can't get it to work right when they're training with it. Now, how is that going to work when you've got not a cooperative partner, but you've got someone that's looking to take your life? If you're a female, you're looking at someone that's going to probably beat you a little, rape you, and then try to kill you. This is going to require a whole different, not only mindset that you're talking about, but if your mindset and your aggression comes out, you're also going to have to be doing things that are going to work. So if you're not being taught to rip at eyes, to rip at throats, if the opportunity comes to rip at the groin, there's probably not much that you're going to do that's going to work against someone that's going to, in probably all cases, be bigger, be stronger, initially come out with that aggression. If we're using a 0 to 10, they're probably 10 plus. And you have to match that aggression, and not only match that, but you have to match it with something that is absolutely going to work, because you're going to have a very limited opportunity. Training in law enforcement really sealed this with me, particularly being involved in the training of others there, that it's a very hard concept to get across. That one, you got to be able to go from being a normal person to being probably more aggressive and more violent than the person that's trying to hurt you almost instantly. And then your training, when it does kick in, when you default to your subconscious, you better have had the right things plugged in there, because you're going to have a very narrow window to use whatever you've been taught. If it don't work real quick, it's probably not going to work at all, because the other person isn't going to stop what they're doing until you've caused them to stop what they're doing by your actions. So these things all have to integrate together at that moment where someone is trying to get on top of you, someone is trying to get a hold of you, they're swinging at you, they're doing whatever they're doing to try to harm you. Everything has to fall in place. So, my advice is that, one, if you're seeking training, you got to seek out people that are teaching something that's worth training. If you're being taught technique number one in a series of whatever in amount, and you're trying to pull these things out of your subconscious when someone's trying to really hurt you, probability is that's not going to work for you. You need to train realistically with people who know what they're doing. If they're in an area where you happen to be, I'd highly recommend them going to you and learning things that are going to be valuable to them. So, in short, I would just say all your aggression has to come right up to meet the requirement. And along with it has to come training that is going to be of value to you. And as you stated so emphatically, that still doesn't mean that everything is going to be okay. That still doesn't mean that you might not get cut by a blade, that you may not get your jaw broken by a punch, or any other things that happen in the context of a fight, because these are things that happen in real fights. It's not a contest match where you got referees and you got rules, and if someone gets a little bit hurt from a shot, that someone breaks the match and says, okay, stop. That's not going to be the case. So we got to prepare for something different.
Well, Lou, thank you for the kind words, and I agree 100%. And what I would say to anybody that's ever confronted with this type of a threat is to remember that they're human beings too. They break, bleed, and die too, just like everybody else does. They're not guaranteed the victory just because they initiate the assault. They're at just as much risk as you are. And so you've got to be willing to fight for yourself, because you're worth it, knowing that no matter how intimidating they are and how scared you are, how caught off guard you are, they're just as much risk as you are. And you have every bit as much right to fight and every bit as much potential to win. You just have to go through the motions of applying the aggression to simple skills, proven skills, skills that are easy to learn and remember, skills that have a high potential of causing injury, skills that are proven in real circumstances. With the right mindset and the simple skills, you can be the one that walks away from that encounter breathing. And I can say I've dealing with the medical examiner and the different victims that we dealt with, and of course when you're there with the medical examiner, it's because the victims are dead, that with every dead body I picked up off the ground, the more convinced I was that criminals just aren't that good at injuring people. The only reason why they're successful is because they're tenacious enough to keep going, and the people who should be fighting back aren't. But if you have the ability to injure them better than they can injure you, and you have the willingness to do it to them first, there's no reason why you can't be the one who's walking away breathing. And you're worth that fight. So we never put our safety in the hands of their compassion. They're not compassionate, or they wouldn't be hurting us in the first place. You always put your safety in the hands of your aggression. And I don't care how tough they seem, when they're getting injured, 99 out of 100 times, they're going to be a very different person. And the only way that you're going to get to that point is to be aggressive and take the fight to them, because you're worth fighting for. And Lou, I think we should probably wrap this up. What are your passing thoughts? And I'm very much looking forward to this new series. I think we're going to be able to bring a lot of helpful information to folks and give them a realistic perspective of what happens in violent encounters, so that they can be truly prepared to protect their safety and the safety of the people that they're responsible for.
Well, Ian, thank you for the opportunity to share information with both you and anyone who is listening. We both have the same view on this, and that is that what we're trying to do is just pass suggestions to people so that you can start examining from a perspective that we're trying to project some of the things that might help you with some of the live incidents that happen to people. In both my military time and law enforcement time, we absolutely analyzed everything we could get our hands on. Any incident that happened to any of us, any incidents that happened to people in other agencies surrounding us, with the intent to try to learn from what happened, not in a critique of the individuals involved, but circumstances tend to repeat themselves. And if there's information that we can get from analyzing a particular incident that can help us to better prepare for the time where it may happen in the future, this is positive things to do and essential as part of our training. It's probably almost as important, if not as important, as the physical training we do in our weapons training and our unarmed combat training or other weapons training that we do, because it all kind of gels into the same thing. And this is what we're trying to get across in doing these series. So hopefully the information that we're discussing helps someone. In the case that they are trying to be victimized, our hope is that something that we've said here will help you in the circumstances that you find yourself in to minimize your exposure and minimize your injury and walk away from it as the victor.
Lou, thank you so much for being a part of this video. Thank you to all the viewers for taking time out of their day to watch this video. I hope we were of service to you. Do whatever you can to be safe. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Would you like to connect with Live Safe Academy LLC? Would you like to help us spread the word so we can help more people? Join us at livesafeacademy.com/connect to join our email list. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and leave us a review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook. Get free safety information and learn about our classes and premium online learning opportunities. Because you have the right to be safe, no one has the right to hurt you, and you're worth protecting.